Okay, cool. So today we wanted to talk about shadow work, and yeah, I think there's a couple of important things just to sort of introduce it. One of the things is that I guess I mean shadow work in a a very, very broad sort of concept. I think there's a way that it can have very specific meanings, but really what I mean here is sort of like, it's almost kind of like including all of experience, which is a very, very broad thing, but it's almost like specifically orienting to things that are often excluded or specifically in people have been kind of like shut down or never opened up to. So yeah, that can be kind of like emotions, thoughts, concepts, beliefs, just like the whole sort of thing. And I think that is like shut down around, it's just kind of like opening to a lot. I think we've chatted a little bit about like that can also be positive things as well as difficult things. I'm also like one of the things I'm really, really passionate about is including darkness and challenge in spiritual practice. I think it's like just one of the most transformational things. It's also like what grounds practice in realness rather than like, creating some fantasy world that you can kind of live in. So that's just like a few different things off the top of my head. Is there anything you kind of want to introduce or feels important?
Yeah, it's a turning towards experience that you might otherwise turn away from, do you think?
Yeah.
And bringing, as you said before, love and compassion to those things and non-judgment. Because there's important stuff there, right? There's gold there if we look for it, and there's parts missing from our overall experience. So yeah, there's good reason to go looking for this stuff.
Yeah, nice. Yeah. And I think one of the things is it's really early in the way the model's laid out. It's really early on. It's one of the first ones, kind of no matter which way you go. And I think for me, there's something super important about, there's like an experience that you've had where, I guess the example that's like, I've got a couple of different like points in my life where this has happened, but a really obvious one is the first time I went to some good therapy when I was in my early 20s, and there was like a feeling of there's a very clear before and after of like, before this I just flat out believed that certain things were really set in stone and true about me in the world, and certain things weren't acceptable. I had to behave in certain ways around things. And then you meet someone and you kind of start sharing a little bit of this challenge, and it's like met in a different way to how you expect. It's kind of met with like openness, love, spaciousness, compassion. And then you're like, there's like the sort of nice feeling of shedding some difficult stuff. There's also like a different paradigm you enter into where you're like, the stuff that all these sorts of sort of like implicit assumptions I had about the world and myself are actually more flexible and malleable. And I think that's a lot of what like spiritual practice, especially Buddhism, is about, but it sometimes like misses out this whole kind of like shadow, emotional sort of psychotherapeutic side.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. I really start feeling the relief of that kind of experience as you're talking of, that's okay to talk about that stuff's welcome. I think that kind of stuff you could be semi-consciously hiding from yourself and from other people. Sometimes you might not even know it yourself. It's that kind of stuff that has a lot of shame attached to it. The kind of thing you're like, I don't want anyone to see that. You may not even notice that you're doing that yourself, but yeah, the powerful relief when you actually allow that stuff out into the world and see that it's okay. It doesn't bring about the reaction that you thought it was going to bring about in people. It's really something. It's really something. You can often feel it in your body. So you get a very bodily I get a very bodily reaction to that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
It kind of tells me that that was what I needed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, and that's interesting, because I feel like kind of like where it is on the model, it's in the first column, which is the like the body column, and it feels like it's working at a depth that is, there's something like including the body and including the kind of it's not like I guess you can have like talk therapies and things which are still helpful for people, like just very focused on talking, but I think what's really happening is this stuff is sort of stored in our beings, you know, we carry ourselves and our subconscious, and kind of like, I think the depth of it is very important to sort of include.
It's unequivocal when you find it, isn't it? Like, you know for sure, okay, that's the stuff, because I can feel the effects of it straight away. Yeah. Which tells you, I think, that it's true, it's right, it's the stuff,
Yeah. So then we were having an interesting conversation as well about, it's almost like, it feels like there's some relief and like realness that comes from a kind of acceptance as well of like, oh, everyone has shadows, and every constellation also has shadows, every like setting, societal, like different setups of things, and then it's almost like there's a negotiation always going on between like what's safe to be brought into this container, like what's true, what's like really kind of like oppressively like shutting down around certain shadows that might be oppressive towards certain people in the group and not others, what's like a kind of caretaking of like, you know, being gentle and not including certain stuff because it might disrupt the container too much. There's like different negotiations always going on around this stuff, and that somehow feels important to include in terms of like the realness. And I think it's like interesting because that applies to like containers, kind of like a psychotherapeutic container, where if you're working with a client one-on-one, or a sort of spiritual container if you're on a retreat, that's also true. There's like assumptions about what's allowed and what's not, but then it's also just in like all of our every day-to-day relationships. So it's kind of has this capacity to just span out into our whole lives. I think that's really right what you're saying about the different levels. We talked about relationships, didn't we? But also societal levels, cultural levels, whole like global levels, if you like, about what can be said and what can't be said. And because what we're talking about here is not just a blowing up of all of those kind of unspoken rules, but a kind of because they're there for good reason. We're looking after everybody. You said these things are kind of negotiated, aren't they, subconsciously, and that's really important to do that, because that's how everyone feels safe. But what might we be missing in that negotiation, in those rules? What might be being left out that would enrich the experience for everybody? So it's not just blowing everything up, it's just kind of inquiring, isn't it? Being curious about what might be here that we're not allowing into experience. That's lovely. I think that question, like what might be missing, is really nice. It's like a sort of open it. It's like it feels kind of like gentle enough, but also like, you know, inviting enough that it can open things up. Because I think the process of shadows coming out is often disruptive. It's stressful and disruptive. Everyone needs to be a bit sort of like up for it and kind of like, okay, let's like have a look at what's here. Like, what are we missing? Yeah. But having some care around that.
Yeah, making it feel safe enough for everybody that you can actually do the work without kind of closing up and running away.
Yeah. Yeah, we've talked a bit about kind of like keeping your own form.
Right.
And I think for me that's quite a challenging thing. I notice I shift a lot, and I think it's because there's a sense of often feeling into that like negotiation around like, oh, what can I be here, what's allowed, and sort of like pushing the boundaries of it a little bit, but and that sort of, I don't know, that being around like positive emotions, which ones are welcome, like it just feels like such an intrinsic part of being human, this like negotiation that's always happening.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, keeping your own form, and maybe wondering like what is my form, what's my natural form if I'm not meeting any of those kind of rules, societal rules or relationship rules, then what do I look like? And I don't know. I don't have a like, even after a lot of inquiry into myself, I don't have like a answer to that. And part of life is about being in relationship, isn't it? And we sort of without the relationships, what are we? But maybe what we're looking for then is like what's most true about ourselves. Not like a absolute us when there are no other people around, but like, what's the true part of us that we'd rather like want to bring into other relationships that we're not allowing in. Stuff I'd really like you to know about this part of myself or this aspect of myself that I just don't ever show, and our relationship might be richer as a result of me bringing that.
Yeah, that's beautiful. When you say that, I can really feel it. That's really moving. It's like, and I think you've sort of hit on the bit where, because it feels like that kind of the shadow work in the way we're talking about it can be an endless practice in all different aspects of life. But I think where it really meets the more kind of like, where it specifically meets the more kind of spiritual practice bit, I think there's something, the thing around truth feels very just like, deep and crisp, and kind of like it's almost like what truths are not allowed to be present either as a collective or in your sort of deepest truths. To me, kind of spiritual practice is about orienting towards truth and love. And that the sense of bringing that out of the shadows feels super important.
Because what are we hoping to gain? Maybe that's the question that's coming from us. What are we hoping to gain by doing this kind of inquiry and this kind of work? And the relief, like we talked about before, not needing to like work so hard to hide or cover up parts of yourself, but like you said, there's positive parts of experience that we also cover up for whatever reason, and like a richer life experience, really powerful emotions, really good like sense of really being alive can be found, I think, in this sort of material. It's joyful stuff.
It's lovely. Just like as you talk about it, I'm hit with the sense of like liberation. It's it just feels like one of the deepest liberations when things can just be free and express themselves.
Very much so. Very much. Sort of feeling that from my own experience as we're talking about it. Yeah, for sure.
Nice.
Do we want to talk about what that kind of thing looks like? Like what?
Yeah, nice idea. Yeah.
What we even how we might even go about doing that kind of stuff, and Yeah, I feel like there's a kind of practice around this, isn't there? And it's not a formal practice, but it's kind of cultivating certain conditions.
Mm-hmm.
And it takes time. It's not something you can learn about and then happen, but it's just inviting curiosity around these sorts of experiences. Looking out for the things that you perhaps try to hide from people and yourself, of course. The emotions you might be squashing down, There's something that feels important to me in all of this. It's just really looking out for that, your body reacting to something. Those really powerful, like, bodily reactions that that tell you, like, something's going on, there's something here. And what you do with it might be completely different, but just, like, looking out for, oh, I'm really angry at this, or feeling immense joy when I talk about this stuff. Like, maybe there's something to really look into here. What more could I be getting from this experience that I'm not at the moment?
Yeah, that's lovely. Yeah. Yeah, and I think that really helps with the sort of owning the darkness part, or owning the challenge part, because there's a sort of subtle move where you're wanting to bring it into your experience and not be projecting it out. But equally, you don't want to turn the projection in and kind of go into, like, self-hatred, self-blame, anything like that. It's like, when you say grounding it in the body, that feels like a way to, like, connect with it without putting on the kind of blame or sort of negative feeling with it. You're just like, it holds that, it keeps the curiosity alive.
Yeah, and what you were just saying about it can be really hard. It can bring up a lot of shame, a lot of really hard stuff when you start seeing parts of yourself that maybe even you were blindsided by. It can be a rough ride.
Yes.
This kind of stuff. I think relationship's quite important, isn't it?
Yeah.
Doing this kind of stuff in relationship is maybe important, maybe mandatory.
Yeah. I think some level of being met in these places with love and acceptance from others.
Yeah.
It's like, you can, doing some on your own is possible and great, and it's a really nice practice to have, but it just opens doors that it kind of gets beyond your sort of, like, hard walls or something of what you think is possible. Someone can kind of step in with their presence and be like, oh, actually, no, that's not a problem, don't worry about that bit. And then it's just like, free.
yeah, right.
But yeah, sometimes you really have to go through the whole, like, wrestling with yourself and the layers of things coming up, and it being really, really, really hard. It feels like the most difficult aspect of the path, maybe in that sense, because it's like, doing 100 hours of jhana practice, like, might be a bit difficult, but doing hundreds of hours trawling through your shadows,
sure. it's going to shake things up a little bit, isn't it? Yeah, sure.
I think maybe, like, part of that is that it's also, I think, the richest part. You get the deepest transformation from it. There's a way that, like, I'm just saying this now, so maybe it's not true.
Try it, see how it sounds.
It almost feels to me, in a way, like a lot of the other stuff is just supporting the capacity to be able to do this, because the shadows are, in a way, the things that stop the liberation, the truth, the free flow of experience. Yeah.
It's perhaps the most available in some ways. It's there in our everyday experience. Almost don't need to go looking too far for it. It's perhaps something that almost everyone can have some recognition of.
Yeah.
It's not too far from our everyday experience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess maybe when I say that, I see the bits of it that aren't true. It's funny, isn't it? I feel like that's part of it as well. It's like, it's almost like you don't know until you've... I think one of the big things about shadow work is you can't... I think one of the biggest things for me that has happened again and again and again, thousands of times, is that you can't imagine you sort of have to go through... The way out is through. And it's like you have to go through the thing and then you come out the other side and you're almost like in a different... It like changes the shape of the environment that you're in in a way where you can't imagine that before you've felt the feelings, said the thing.
Yes, absolutely. It works in other ways that you can't really explain.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it kind of loosens everything up a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, and opens things up for more inquiry once you started. It's a sort of snowball effect, perhaps, and just keep going with it.
Yeah. But yeah, I think maybe coming back to, I guess, how people might do it. I think, I guess like when I'm running retreats or guiding meditations or things like that, I'm always like, when are we making space to bring the shadows in? Like for example, when we were doing a Vipassana retreat, I made space. I did a guided meditation on forgiveness first thing on the morning, where it was like, because we were doing it everyone was doing it from home on their laptops. And there was a sense of like, everyone's going to want to stay mindful over the night, but they're not going to because it's too hard. So it was like the feeling of just like opening it up and like forgiving yourself and like welcoming in all the bits where you just like went and watched a movie or like did something or like had a beer or and then so it was like really just feeling into making space for all the difficult stuff that came up from the session the night before to the first session. And then having a group sharing where we were like, is there anything you want to share that's come up? And then like people had different emotional things that were challenging, and then it just sort of like it clears the way a bit for people to then be present, because otherwise it's so easy for people to just hang on to either like self-judgment or disappointment or like whatever, like stress or the feelings that were kind of building up from those things, and they just carry it through the whole retreat experience without ever airing it. So it's almost like finding places where that's possible, like whether it's personal psychotherapy or like even kind of like journaling practice or something where you're just like getting things moving, getting things out, paying attention to these things that are difficult, like making space for them. Yeah, what you were just saying about meditation practice it really landed with me. I think when I used to sit down to meditate, half the time I would make the decision within the first few minutes that I'm not going to have a good session. I'm not in the right place to meditate. My mind's too busy. I'm too agitated. I'm maybe too angry. There's something going on that will stop me meditating right now. So it's not gonna work. And then I came around to the idea that actually, like, noticing those things was the meditation. And going, okay, this is what's here now. Let's like hang out with that thing, and that was the meditation. It was not something I was trying to get to. It was like seeing what's here right now. That's lovely. Big thing. I think that was my core meditation. I kind of merged meditation and shadow work and just turned every meditation practice into a shadow work. Basically, not all of them, but it was my core practice of just being like, what's the hardest thing in my experience right now? And like, how deep can I go into it? And like, how much can I feel it? Which, you don't have to do. I'm not saying you have to do that, but it's a possibility with meditation practice. I think that's nice. We're not very good at being with difficult experience, are we? That's a big part of the thing we're looking at, isn't it? Is how to be with really difficult experience, how to invite it in and get to know it, even for a brief period of time. It doesn't have to be
all the time diving into
No.
the hard stuff, but just like allowing it in for a little bit and then going, yeah, that's pretty hard, that stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. It almost feels like I think we've touched on this a little bit, but it feels like there's almost like a couple of layers of like different ways of relating it to the shadow work bit. There's the kind of like going in, processing, really feeling, really being with, really like going through it, and kind of the transformational aspect of that. And then there's also like a kind of open acceptance of the imperfection and difficulty of life, and sort of not just like allowing things to be there as they are without having to dive into them and change them, but just sort of a gentle awareness of like, oh, this difficult thing's there. And I think having some balance between those two things is important.
Yeah, absolutely. And even I was just thinking something my therapist does is certain experiences I'll dissociate because I can't bear them, but then like befriending the dissociation itself, getting to know that and going, oh yeah, this is what's happening, I'm dissociating now, and something I can't bear, but like let's make friends with that part of experience, the numbness, the can't be there, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that's lovely. Yeah I remember that being quite transformational when someone did that for me around confusion as well.
Right.
It was like, the confusion's there for a reason, to protect you and keep you safe. And,
absolutely.
You can just stay with that for now, and that was really freeing.
Yeah, which is, maybe it's important to say, isn't it, that all these parts that we're talking about, the things we do, the things that we can't bear, are all there for protection, and they're not bad. Then there's nothing wrong with them, but they might have the key to something more.
Yeah.
If we're open to it.
Yeah. Yeah. Lovely. That feels like a nice place to finish. That feels good.
It feels good.
Cool.